So, John, welcome to The Road Not Taken.
Good morning, Matt. Great to be with you.
Thank you very much. So, I'm going to dive straight in. My first question that I wanted to ask you is, if you had to pick one thing that you think has helped you most in terms of getting out of your own way, what would you say that is?
Boy, that's such a great question. I'm going to cheat a little bit because one is going to be internal and one is going to be external. And so internally, for me, I had uh, to get out of my own way was to learn more about myself. So I've done a whole number of things on learning more about how I operate, how I think, and so that's the internal mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And the external mechanism that's been most meaningful to me has been surrounding myself with the people, the processes, and the programs. And in that is the resources that has allowed me to not only fuel my knowledge, but improve my capabilities and continually work on my attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that has allowed me to become the more authentic John Nichols. And that has led to my greatest fulfillment, whether that be personally and or professionally.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm just wondering where the best place to start is based on, that's a lot of different things in some ways, although it certainly makes sense that you go inside and internal and external. Um, I guess just since where you started with internal, in terms of that whole notion of be true to thyself and get to know yourself. Can you give us some specific things that you say that have helped you in terms of learning more about yourself? Has it been books, classes? Is it journaling? What has it been for you?
Yeah, so you touched on a couple of them. So certainly the books I read, right? You're feeding your mind. Two, a number of what I'll call profiles, and we've both have done a number of those to include Colby as one. I just did the Hogan profile for leadership. I just recently did the Culture Index. That was fascinating. And then the other. Oh, excuse me.
You said it's called what? The Culture Index.
Culture Index. A buddy of mine by the name of Andy Bunce is running that, and he used me as a guinea pig. He's out of Oklahoma, and again, just another way to learn how I operate. And that particular profile focuses on your core, which generally you're hardwired, and then it compares that with your current behavior. And you'll kind of see, are you out of balance? Why are you out of balance? And what's driving that? And so that was an excellent exercise. So books, profiles, certainly classes that I've taken. I see a ton of professional speakers, whether that be through webcasts or in person. All of those items have helped me reflect on who I am, how I operate, and how best can I continually improve myself.
Mm-hmm. So, John, it's funny, when you say those things, the first thing that pops into my head is how busy everybody is. And obviously you're constantly learning and growing, but you also use the word reflect. So how do you do it? I'll say how do you reflect, but when do you do that, or how do you take that time? What specifically do you do?
Yeah, so look, it's certainly early in the morning for me when I get up, kind of get the daily routine out of the way, and then I have time for myself before my busy day starts. Sometimes at night, hey, look, I'll just take a walk. I'll go for, as you know, I do a lot of running.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how much thinking you can do while you're running.
Yeah.
And then certainly there's times during the weekend where, hey, look, I'll just go to the coffee shop, take my notebook and just kind of be with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be some of the times where I've taken for myself. I think it's critical that people invest in themselves. And even though we're busy, look at, you're busy, married, twins, you got kids going left and right, but yet it's important to, where's the me time? Where's the Matt time? Where's the John time? And I don't care if it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 10 minutes, start the process of spending time for yourself so you can remain grounded as you then continually learn about yourself and how you operate.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of really useful things that are coming up here, John, and things that I want to follow up with you on. But just to sort of recap some of them, because some of these are very specific things. So it might be an early morning or an evening walk, running. So some kind of exercise can help reflect, specifically sitting down to write about it. You mentioned reflecting early in the morning. What does that look like?
Yeah, so look at one funny little thing that I do is I do some exercising in the morning, and before I have coffee, I've got to do some plank work. And I'm up to a 6-minute plank, and so 6 minutes you're just sitting there being with yourself. It's like a form of yoga, if you will. And so just in that period of time, I can kind of ground myself and just be with who I am and allow the stresses of the day or the previous day or the weight of what's on my mind to kind of just dissipate away for that period of time. And look at, do you have to do a 6-minute plank? No, but just when do you be with yourself? It's actually at that time of the day before I begin my calls is I'll do my 30 minutes of reading. Again, sometimes it's only 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 40 minutes. And it just forces me to take the time to feed myself, not just nourishment of food or coffee, but also nourishment of something that's helping me learn and grow.
It's interesting. So 2 weeks ago, I read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. I don't know, are you familiar with that book?
Yes, I am, actually.
Yeah, so it's funny because the morning routine that he endorses the most consists of getting up at 5, exercising for 20 minutes, reflecting and/or meditating, praying, goal set, visualize for 20 minutes, and then learn for 20 minutes. Is it fair to say that models quite closely what you do?
Yeah, maybe not the 5 a.m., but you know what? Everybody's got their own sleep requirements. I mean, and that's one thing I've learned is everybody's a little different. So let's find out what's your way of doing it. What works for you? Some people just are night people, and they do their best work, later in the day. I do my best work earlier in the day.
Yeah.
And so although it may not be 5 a.m., the reality is I'll do it in the morning session before my day really begins, my work day, if you will.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate you mentioning that because I'm working on a book on the topic of getting out of your own way, and I'm very keen for it not to be a one-size-fits-all, to say you've got to do it this way, whatever that might be. So thanks for mentioning some people's most productive time isn't in the morning. It's in the evening.
That gentleman does 20 minutes of workouts. I might do 2 workouts. I might do 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes to close the day. Before I have dinner, I'll go work out for another 20 or 30 minutes. So it doesn't, it's like you said, it's not one size fits all. It's what works for you to work on that big category of yourself. Hey, look at, not everybody likes to maybe exercise. Maybe they like to read. Maybe they like crossword puzzles. Maybe they like, I don't know what it is, but figure it out and then apply it so that you can continually work on yourself.
And then I think just one more question on that topic.
Yeah.
In terms of getting out of your own way, the connecting the dots is, okay, so it's helpful to reflect so you get to know yourself, but presumably it's also so that you come up with ways to improve your life and grow and be a bigger and better person. So when do you come up with your best ideas? In other words, is that what you haven't spelled out yet?
Yeah, well, look at when I come, my best ideas are in the shower. And I don't know why, it just seems to happen that way. And or it's it's sometimes while I'm sleeping, whether that be just before or, quite frankly, earlier in the morning. I've been kind of thinking about it. So, certainly the shower, sometimes sleeping, but also then when I'm running. And I think a lot of it is you just freed your mind of a lot of the gobbledygook, I call it, that's blocking you. And the subconscious is working on it, and then it pushes it up, and then voila, there it is. And so I don't know. Again, everybody may have a different way about going about that, but for me, those have been some of the places or the times where the fruition of the ideas come forward.
And then, John, another question that probably isn't one you might necessarily expect, but you talk about the importance of me time. I couldn't agree more, and I can only speak from my own life experience, which obviously has some limits, but it seems to me that women, and especially mothers, have a tougher time either justifying or fitting in me time. And I'm just curious, because I know you've coached quite a lot of people as well. I don't know, has that been your experience, and how have you addressed that with people, with women?
Yeah, 100%. And if they're married, right, they have a spouse or a significant other, I would tell the spouse or the significant other, make sure your wife has that time. just encourage it, make it happen, because you will only be not only helping them, but you'll be helping the relationship with the kids, the relationship with yourself, maybe between the two of you. So you have to force the issue.
Have you coached many women on where that has come up?
Well, as you may know, Kelly Clemens and I, believe it or not, we're going on our third year every Tuesday, 11 a.m. We've had a call. I think we've only missed 2 or 3 of them. Kelly has got some content around the relationship, and especially women. And there's 6 pieces to it. I'll just share 3 of them. The power of play, praise, and purpose. Those are 3 of them. And so that's where I've been exposed to it the most. The stories that she's sharing with me, that women are struggling finding that me time, and they're trying to raise their hand and say, how do I get that? Are other people having this problem? And what are we doing about it? How do we solve that problem? Because it seems like we're always go, 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 go. And we got to find a way to get the time out, right? We need the time out. Look, everybody went to grade school for the most part, as far as I know. What was the one period that I know I got an A in? What do you think? What class period did I get an A in? Well, it's called recess.
Recess, yeah.
You know what recess is, right? We take a time out from classwork and we go out and we play.
Right.
And so how do we get recess for ourselves, whether it be for our spouse, ourselves, or even together?
Right.
I think recess is an important element.
Yeah. And again, I do not want to put words in your mouth, but in light of the topic, in terms of, again, becoming a bigger person, getting out of your own way, dealing with adversity, are you saying that the need for taking a break, for me time, for reflection time, for timeouts to recharge, that's pivotal to having breakthroughs?
Well, no, here's why. It allows you to remove yourself from being so close to the issue. It gives you the space and the breathing room to allow yourself to be removed. Because look, anytime you have a problem or adversity, we're right in the middle of it. We're so close to it.
Right.
When do we get to break away from it and look at it from afar? It's look, we've all heard the saying, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? Well, that same thought process is with you as an individual and also with people that are married. Are we working in the relationship or are we working on the relationship? And I'm trying to encourage people, as you are, is let's find some time to work on the relationship or on ourself or on our business, because that's where the great insights happen.
So I want to kind of dive back to, well, not dive back, ask you about, I guess, some of your biggest adversities, because obviously that's presumably, what's made you the person you are today. I mean, was your water skiing accident the biggest adversity you've had, or do you honestly think you've had a different one that you've had to overcome?
Well, two. Look at certainly the accident and going through the near-death experience, trying to recover from quadriplegia, repositioning myself back into the world, getting to a place of self-acceptance, and then trying to excel at, with the capabilities I have in the business world, getting back to where I was, or really getting way beyond where I was.
Right.
Yeah, certainly that was probably without a doubt the biggest challenge. But needless to say, look, I've had relationship challenges. I've had, and even on a smaller scale, I have call reluctance, adversity. I mean, so it could be as something as small as that, or as big as the accident that you mentioned.
Right. And do you recall what helped you most get through the? I mean, you broke your neck. Is that correct? Or your back, your spine?
Yeah. No, it was a broken neck.
Yeah.
C5, C6.
Yeah. So, I mean, what were the things that helped? Because you could have gone. I mean, your life could have gone in a completely different direction. I mean, you could have taken the news you got from the doctors and, not. Been confined to a wheelchair? Is that a fair comment?
Look I'll even go even further. Confined to a wheelchair, or just unable to mentally get to a place of acceptance, so I check out on life.
Right.
I mean, it's so yeah, very challenging. How do you deal with that? So I would suggest a couple of things. One, certainly my upbringing and all the coaches and the mentors and the things that I learned along the way contributed to my success, because they fed my mind, they trained my mind that I don't ever give up. And that probably falls right in line with my stubbornness, right? I'm always going to prove you wrong. If you tell me I can't do something, you're tapping into my motivation to prove you wrong. And maybe that has something to do in growing up in a large family where, not being, or being that kid where that was a way for me to get attention. I don't know. So that's a piece of it. Secondly, was getting connected with people that believed in my potential of recovery. I think that was helpful. 3, having an incredible work ethic that my dad or my mom, both of them, gave us, forced me, or didn't force me, having the work ethic that my parents gave me provided the mindset that I was going to do the rehabilitation necessary to get to a level of recovery. So all those things kind of contributed to the success I had in overcoming that adversity. But as we've talked, I'm sorry.
No, it's funny. I think one of the things that all of us underestimate are the number of, but we all did grow up with some positive messages, even in difficult environments that people grew up in. I think just about everybody got some positives. They may not remember them, but when you talk about like the work ethic piece, I just think that's really significant. I mean, again, that's your example, but I think everyone has those things to draw on, even when times are low, that they just forget. So in other words, I think we all grow up with mixed messages, and some of them are very empowering and some of them are very debilitating. And so obviously part of all of our roles is to focus more on some of those positives and build off those, and then of course nurture some of the other ones that perhaps weren't strong for us growing up. One of the questions it's funny, I've always wanted to ask you this, and I never have, but I've often wondered this about motivation and drive, because I've met a few people that have had, I suppose, close calls with death, one way or the other, whether it was a cancer diagnosis or an accident like yours, and there does seem to be a skewed number of people that have had those experiences that have unusual drive. And so for the people listening who can't relate to your accident, how do you coach people or work with people that haven't had a near-death experience to build their motivation or their sense of purpose?
Yeah, so sense of purpose and motivation, probably two different things.
Okay.
And I would encourage anyone listening is, let's just focus on the sense of purpose.
Okay.
And usually what I find is that they hadn't thought about it, or it's the sense of purpose is something materialistic. And so it needs to maybe to be realigned. They're chasing something materialistically rather than chasing something that just has more fulfillment.
Right.
But I want to just touch back on one other thing that you said earlier. It's those, regardless of how people grew up, one of my keys to success is, yes, focus on myself internally, and yes, try to accentuate the positive. But one way to help that is to surround yourself with people that you would either admire, or they're mentors, or they've had some success in their life, they've achieved, and when you do that, it rubs off. That old line, success breeds success, it really does.
Yeah.
I've been very blessed, very fortunate to be surrounded by and get myself positioned to be surrounded by those types of people. And they have forced me to become a better version of who I am. I'll just give you a quick example. You as one example, we schedule up a podcast. It forced me to not only schedule the time, but to be mentally prepared for it. And so, one of the things I think we talked about earlier in a previous call was accountability. Hey, look at accountability is great, right? We have a deadline, and that'll get, some level of the job done. But when somebody holds you accountable to the actual result, that's when it really gets done.
I want to talk about that more for several reasons. One, because it's been a weakness of mine. I feel like I've run from accountability way too much, and if I'm honest, I suppose it's because you don't want it, because you don't want to feel badly about yourself, because that's going to make you feel even worse, and so it's easier to avoid it and pretend that, I can hold myself accountable. I mean, that probably is the biggest reason. So in other words, if we're feeling somewhat shaky on the inside, the last thing we want is accountability that might make us feel worse. But it's clear how important it really is, as you say, because it holds you. Well, firstly, it forces you more to actually do what you say you want to do. But can you again talk about people that have been in my shoes a lot, where what are the keys for people listening, I suppose, to have more success with accountability?
Yeah, it's just so one, recognize that having a deadline, progress will be made. So look at, you're already making progress just by having a deadline. We had a deadline today. Today we're doing the podcast. Right. I needed to be prepared. Hey, I made progress on that. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, by having another person involved, that's when the results will be crystallized.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, we'll learn even more about yourself. You may not get 100% of the results, but you'll get more results by having that person involved. And sometimes it's just a matter of having the right person, and that's key.
Talk about that, because I've got my own thoughts on that, but I want to hear what yours are. You know, what's your definition of the right person in terms of someone to hold you accountable?
Well, it'll depend upon the person on the other side, meaning who do I interface with best to get the best result? Do I need somebody that's going to hold me hard and fast?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need a yeller? Do I need somebody that's going to be a little softer? Is that person accountable? Imagine if you're working with a mentor or a coach and they don't do what they say they do.
Yeah.
You know, what's the rules? Can we hold each other accountable? So I'm not interested in the person. I don't need the screamer. I need just somebody to keep showing up, number one,
mm-hmm.
and keep challenging me, because my plane of view is only this way.
Yeah.
Their plane of view is probably different.
Yeah.
And
do you think that's quite a difficult person to find? Because again, I've just got to speak off the top of my head, I suppose, and things I've typically said in the past on this. But I mean, I've always said to people, you know, it needs to be someone that you know, won't be a shoulder to cry on, somebody that you'd feel badly failing in front of. I mean, I feel like those have been typically my two. But as you said, you know, and I find that the challenge with one-to-one relationships is often they get comfortable, and then they cease to be effective from an accountability standpoint, because then you just become good friends or too nice to one another. So I feel like there's all these dynamics that we have to sort of pay attention to for it to continue to be effective. Again, feel free to disagree on any of that, but have your experiences been different there?
Well, so look at Matt. Hey, just to challenge you, you're only doing this in the podcast Q&A, but you're focused on the negative. When I get into accountability, I focus on the positive.
Mm-hmm.
Look, because I know where it's going to take me. Look, we all fail. Here, let me give you a heads up. Anytime that I am charged to do something,
mm-hmm.
here, I was supposed to make my 10 phone calls this morning before this podcast.
Yeah.
Guess what showed up?
An unexpected life event.
The excuses.
Okay. Okay.
They always show up.
Uh-huh.
That's just human nature. And so let's just get beyond that and just speak the truth. Excuses show up. It's our job is to overcome the excuses and, you know, go do our work, go do our, get the behavior done. And so, but let me just add one additional piece on this accountability. By surrounding yourself with people, what I mean is get involved in situations in which you will learn, so it'll benefit you. You will serve, it'll benefit others, but it will also be a place where it's accountable.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it this way. Any board work that I've done, do you think I was held accountable?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Absolutely, 100%. Any committee work I've done, always been held accountable. And it doesn't have to be within our industry. It could be board work outside the industry. It could be committee work outside our industry. It could be some other team for your personal life. It could be a hobby. The more you get involved in groups of people, that accountability is there. And so now we're just saying, well, all right, I want to be held accountable on a one-on-one relationship because I want to improve my business. Okay, it's the same. It's just a one-on-one dynamic. It's just a form of accountability. So in life, we have forms of accountability. Look at Matt. You have accountability in your marriage, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
I mean, and so we have accountability all around us. Just because it's now one-on-one and it's for the purpose of our business doesn't necessarily have to be negative.
I'm sorry, you've lost me there. So what was it that came across that you thought was negative?
Well, I'm having feelings of failure. I don't like to fail in front of somebody.
Sure, sure.
Well, look at it. In just the 20 minutes we've been on this call, I failed.
Right. Well,
you know, I've stumbled.
But that's no. But to me, I'm hearing something slightly different there in terms of, having a healthy attitude towards failure, which I know for me has been a very difficult life lesson. I mean, in other words, I don't feel like I'm not sure when I remember two vivid times when I learned it, but clearly I also forgot it. But I think, but just this notion that failure is the only way you get there, I don't think I don't know how common that belief is in our culture, because we typically hear about the champions and the winners and this and that, rather than hear interviews where people talk about the litany of things that they failed at and fell on their face with first. They tend to like to cut to the chase and say, John, you're a very successful businessman. Tell me all about your successful business.
Every day, it's just not a final failure.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I run, and I've run the Chicago Marathon the last 9 years. There's 40,000 runners with the Chicago Marathon.
Yeah.
Do you think I ever won the race?
I'm guessing no.
No. My first race, I finished in 6 hours, 9 minutes, and 59 seconds. I was the 35th or 35,330th runner. I mean, I was at the back of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
But was it a failure? No, it wasn't a failure. So it's just how you look at it, and how I'm okay with failing. I just don't spend a lot of time with it. I learn the lesson and I move on.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's good. I also want to ask, in terms of accountability, again, I'm making an assumption here, but again, I'll just speak for myself and also speak for people I coach. I mean, typically, I most like to hold them accountable for things that I suppose I would describe are uncomfortable for them, and that therefore the accountability will help kind of push them to get it done because it's in their own best interests. Can you talk about doing the uncomfortable in terms of how you think that's helped you, again, achieve a lot more in life?
Yeah, so remember earlier you were talking about where did that drive come from?
Mm-hmm.
One is having a specific purpose, right? So I have a belief in this particular purpose, mm-hmm. and that burning desire to want to accomplish or contribute to that purpose. But here's where the drive also comes from. I've just never been satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I'm because as soon as I get satisfied, I'm human just like everybody else. I get lazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to allow myself to get satisfied. It doesn't mean I don't enjoy the fruits of the labor. It just means my mission in life, my purpose in life is so big and so meaningful, mm-hmm. that I'm just not satisfied. I want to keep moving forward.
Okay, so I want to stop you there for a second because that's already raises two big questions. I mean, would you be comfortable sharing what your purpose is?
Yeah, my purpose in life is, with all my mind, with all my heart, and with all my resources, is to serve people. And pretty simple. Yeah.
How long do you think it took you to come up with that?
35 years. 0 to 35, right?
Okay.
And really, for me, quite frankly, it came from a class. A class, forced me, if you will, held me accountable, mm-hmm. to building a business plan. And the way I built the business plan was the business plan of John F. Nichols Incorporated, mm-hmm. not my business disability resource group.
Right.
A little different twist there.
So, again, when you're helping other people, because, again, to me, purpose is a meaty topic. I feel like we could talk about it for more than an hour on its own. But I always sense that most people haven't thought their own purpose through, perhaps too much. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I just think it's as you indicated, I mean, it can take years sometimes, I think, before we get to the point where we feel like we have something that makes sense. But you're saying that it's worth the effort anyway because it gives you so much fuel in terms of your drive to make a difference in the world. Is that a fair comment?
Fair comment. So, Matt, I'll ask you a question. Do you think you and your bride have a purpose?
Well, absolutely, yes. And once you've got kids, that becomes a kind of an inevitable one.
I mean, and how cool is that? I mean, that is so precious, so powerful. That is so motivating. It's got to drive you every day because you watching these two kids. I see the picture in the background. How awesome is that? And I can sense the energy, right? And that'll drive your behavior.
Yeah. You know, it's a funny thing because I don't. It's a lovely thing for you to say, and luckily, I totally agree with you. But if I'm really honest, I can't say I've felt that way the whole time since they were born. I don't know if I've always felt like, gosh, I am their role model, and I want to make them proud when they talk about me as they get older. I only feel like in more recent months I've become much more conscious of that. So it's a fascinating thing you bring up. But anyway, thank you for sharing your purpose, because again, I know that's personal. The second piece, though, and in a way you answered this, but when you said one of the keys that's helped you with your drive is never being satisfied. When I hear that, I also hear this red flag of one A type to another, never happy, always striving, not enjoying the journey enough. And I want you to obviously to contest me, but that's my concern when I hear that, because I mean, we travel a lot. We do a lot of business in different places, and you see a lot of, frankly, unhappy people racing from A to B, chasing something, but they certainly don't look happy, and they're stressed out on the plane, and they don't want to shut down their computers when they're doing on takeoff, all that sort of stuff. So talk about that, because I want you to kind of balance it out a little bit, if that's if you feel compelled to do so.
Of course I do. So, of course I do, because I have an answer, right? And this is the way I live my life. It's called daily victories.
Okay.
So, do I get satisfaction on accomplishing daily victories? Absolutely. Who doesn't love to win? So, the day for me is the win, and it's the behaviors within the day that give me that victory. So my morning routine, victory. Making the bed, victory. 6-minute plank, victory. 10 phone calls before 8:30, victory. And what I try to do is accumulate as many victories during the day, and that gives me the satisfaction for the day. And it's propelling me in my purpose. I don't chase the money, I chase the behavior.
And thank you for sharing that, because I just think that's absolutely priceless. And I still want to ask explicitly, is it more of an internal, sort of an intrinsic pleasure you get for doing those daily victories, and or do you celebrate it in some way, even if it's just listing out the accomplishments at the end of the day, or something that acknowledges what you've done right?
Well, so look I'm a big believer in the reward mechanism. So look I do the 6-minute plank and I get my reward, which is my cup of coffee.
Okay.
See how simple that can be?
Yeah.
And I know it's silly, but the brain doesn't look at it that way. And so for me, it's if I do X behavior, I get the reward. And the reward doesn't have to be something big and magical. It can be something very small, but that has meaning to you. I don't know about you, but a cup of coffee in the morning is pretty meaningful.
That's what I plan to do next, actually, John, after this.
And let me just go back one piece. So on the marathon running, I joined a group. Talk about accountability. I joined a group. The reason why I joined the group is that if I completed the training class, it's an 18-week training class, there was a 98% chance that I would finish the marathon. You think about that.
Right.
So the group leaders were holding us accountable. Every Saturday for 18 weeks, had to be at the park at 6 a.m. to do our long run.
Yeah.
And the long run could be anywhere from an hour to 3.5 hours. Just depending upon where we were in the training schedule. I was the last man, last group. I mean, I was at the way back.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, that first marathon, 6:09:59, 6 hours, 9 minutes, 59 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of 9 years, by being part of that group and being held accountable, I moved it from 6 hours down to 4 hours and 21 minutes. Not bad for a C5, C6 recovering quadriplegic.
Right.
And so
that's amazing.
Look at, it doesn't have to be some big thing that has to change your life. Your life can change today with just some simple little changes or additions to help you start to accelerate in the areas that you want to.
Right. So the small changes becoming big gains over time.
Hence, that's where daily victories came from.
Yeah.
Imagine there's over 600 muscles in the body. I had to have those muscles become reactivated. Now, I didn't get it all back, but think about walking, getting to a place where I could jog, eating, dressing, bathing, shaving, all those little things. And I just applied the daily victory concept from my rehabilitation into my personal and professional life. And that's how I played the game.
Is it also fair to say that in terms of connecting dots from where we started about taking time to reflect and knowing yourself, and again, tell me if I'm off, like this is just me, my brain connecting dots that I think I hear, that also that reflecting time gives you a chance to reflect on your own weaknesses. In other words, where you're most likely to actually fail or trip up. And that much of what you've done in terms of, as you say, finding accountability, whether it's groups or surrounding yourself with people or signing up for classes, is knowing enough about yourself to say, I'm going to benefit from having this level of structure and accountability and growth opportunity, because otherwise, left to other devices, I might just do a lot less in my life. Is that a fair comment?
100%. So then think about it. When I started to grow my company, it only started with 2 people, myself and a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Perez.
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin's been with me 20 years, and he's polar opposite of me, totally opposite. And yet I'm accountable to him. He's accountable to me. We started to grow the firm with as many as 20 people at one point in time. Imagine having the responsibility of 19 other people, just kind of like your kids, right? You feel so accountable to them that you perform at a higher level. But if it was just me, well, yeah, maybe, it is pretty sunny out today. Maybe I will head down to the beach or go play my golf. You take on a little different attitude when you have 19 other people that are counting on you to go make it rain, go make the deals.
Right.
And so that's another way to look at accountability, or at least that's what happened in my life.
So are you saying taking on more responsibility?
The more responsibility you take on, and that, hey, goes with committee work, board work, joining groups. Hey, now I'm a group leader for the marathon training. Well, if I'm a group leader for the marathon training, do you think I should be showing up at 6 a.m. to do the long run, or should I show up at 5:45 a.m.? Right? And early is now on time. And so you start putting those things in place, and all of a sudden you start to perform better.
Then to go back to what it's going to take to get people to make more changes like the ones you're talking about, because it's funny, it's such a pleasure to have this conversation, because you talk about it as if somehow in a way that, it makes complete sense. But again, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of the many people, I suppose, including myself, that I've coached over the years that don't follow through on knowing what they need to do, or want to do even. So, you talked about having a specific purpose that helps with a burning desire. You talked about a healthy level of not being satisfied. What else comes to mind? You talked about daily victories. So having some small, specific things to sort of that are uncomfortable perhaps, but that help you move forward each day? And anything else that comes to mind that you think that helps kind of people move forward to get out of their own way?
Well, yeah, certainly here's another one, and it's something I had to learn. And it showed up in my rehabilitation, showed up in my marathon, it showed up in my business. I was, when I was younger, I was always comparing myself to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's great to have role models, but my progress and my trajectory in life, my story, who I am and what I can accomplish is different than Matt Anderson's. It's different than some of my mentors in the insurance industry. And so I actually struggled with, I wasn't able to be as good as them. I mean, do you know Sol Hicks by chance?
I do, yeah.
You know the name, or you've met him, and you know him. You know, Sol Hicks makes top of the table on January 1st, maybe January 2nd. His pipeline is so full of production that he makes top of the table like the first day or second day of the year.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Do you know when I make top of the table?
No.
The last day of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes me all year, and I finally get over the line, and yet, so I don't like comparing myself to others. What I do like to do is compare myself to my previous results.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I don't want to aspire or admire or recognize somebody else's success, and maybe I can learn from them.
Yeah.
But when it comes to evaluating me, I evaluate myself based on my previous results.
I know we need to wrap up fairly soon, and I love what you just shared, because I think to me, that's part of the inside job of kind of catching our thinking. Are there any other sort of mindsets that you think have really helped you? I mean, for example, obviously when you had your accident, you must have had to keep shifting your thinking onto something positive to get you to take action. Can you speak to that a little bit as well? Like other positive mindsets or things that you've learned about ways of looking at the world that have helped empower you to keep wanting to make more of your life?
Yeah, so look, I have some terminology I use. I call it my pace, my race. You know, and again, that gets back to that comparative analysis. It's my race, my pace. I'm going to go about it probably a little different than you are.
Yeah.
And so that is a good reminder for me, my race, my pace. Something I'm going to share in some future speaking engagements. I have something called the Thought Zapper. I'm not going to go into detail here, but it's how do we eliminate the negativity, the negative thoughts that are preventing us from moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, as we talked about earlier, the excuses always show up. It's how do you overcome those excuses and stop letting them prevent you from getting what you want in life or performing in the manner that you want. There are always going to be people that are going to want to hold you back for whatever reason.
Right.
Why are we feeding into that? How do we overcome that?
Is there one thing you can share about zapping limiting beliefs that you find particularly helpful? Because it's such a jugular subject.
Well, so look at, irregardless of how successful you think I am, I still have it today. I still work on it today.
Sure.
So they're always going to be there, and they come up at maybe inopportune times, and I just use the Thought Zapper to zap them away, and so I can stay focused on my purpose and my positive beliefs and my positive behaviors. And I just stay at it every day. What I've done, and I'll leave you with this, is when I have a problem or such as call reluctance, I try to break it down. And the more I can break it down, it's like my daily victories. The more daily victories I can have in a day, the more successful I will be in that day. And so I break the day down almost like every half hour.
Yeah.
Think of it that way. Break the problem down so that it's bite size. We've all heard the story, how do you eat an elephant?
Mm-hmm.
One bite at a time. Well, I'm taking micro bites at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look, 10 phone calls before 8:30 is pretty easy. You know, maybe I need to stretch myself and make it 15. And, you know, so think of it that way. Doing one push-up is doable, right?
Yeah.
All right, maybe today I'll do 2. I didn't get to a 6-minute plank without starting at 30 seconds.
Right.
And just kept building on it.
Yeah. That's it. And by the way, that's pretty amazing because I get very uncomfortable after one. So, anyway, all right. So 3 final questions for you, John. Because the first one is, and I mean, I suppose you can take your pick in terms of where your most challenging place was in life. But you know, who do you think you've become since that most challenging time in your life? Whether it was when you broke your neck or a different time.
Matt, that's a really deep question. You leave it till the end. Who have I become? Geez, I hope, I mean, and it's not for me to judge, I hope I'm somebody that serves people, somebody that wants the best out of myself, somebody that hopefully is going to make a difference at the end of the day. I hope that's the case. But I'll leave it to others to judge it.
Yeah.
I admittedly, I work really hard on it. My thoughts today are much more about making sure I'm making a difference in the areas that are meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Certainly the industry is one.
Mm-hmm.
I have some outside organizations that I'm participating in. You know, that would be another.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly for myself as just a human being, I want to maximize my potential, whether that be physically or mentally or in the service that I give to people.
Absolutely love it. Thank you, John. I'm glad that engaged you so much. What, for people listening, obviously you've given many suggestions, but what's the first step that comes to mind? For someone
stop and take the time out, right? It's okay to, here's my journal. I have it right here.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's okay to take a few minutes and just write down. It doesn't have to be long. Just write down, what is it that I want to be known for? What is one thing that I could work on today or start tomorrow? Look at my journey. It's a journey. When I started doing marathon running, I was 174 pounds. Today, I'm around 148, 149.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight. I just want who's ever listening just to start. Just start. And so then what's the other easy thing to do? Connect with a mentor. Connect with somebody else, because quite frankly, it's more fun to do it with somebody else.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, Kelly Clemens and I, we've been talking almost 3 years, every Tuesday at 11 a.m. I get plenty out of it. She gets plenty out of it. So we just keep going.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic idea. Do it myself, highly recommend it. So, and my last question is, how can listeners keep in touch with you?
How can people stay in touch with me? Well, certainly my email or cell phone. Do you want me to give that data?
Give us a website or something that if people have follow-up questions.
Oh, so the website I totally forgot about. You know, I have a johnfnichols.com website. You can always reach me on my cell phone, text enable 773-230-9438. Why don't we just leave it with those two?
Yeah, okay. And then Nichols, Nichols, so johnfnichols.com. Correct, John? Is that right?
That's correct.
Brilliant. Okay. So, John, an enormous thank you. I'm just going to sort of wrap up with a few comments here. But this has been fantastic. I mean, I've got so many notes here in terms of for show notes for next steps. I've got my work cut out, but I love that there have been so many useful, tangible things that anybody can pick up with here. And thank you for sharing your time. It's really been an honor.
Matt, you're one of my all-time faves, buddy, and so happy to know you, happy to be with you, happy to share some time with you. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'm just going to wrap up here. So kind of my word of caution that I mentioned in my introduction for all of you really is, too often I know when I listen to interviews with people who've really clearly done some remarkable things in their lives, it is easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I can never be like that person. I'll never be as successful. And so all I'm saying, is, don't fall into that trap. And it's really just a gentle reminder for myself as well, and of course everyone listening. All of us have flaws, and you don't have to be perfect in every area to accomplish remarkable things. So that's really what I wanted to sort of leave things with today. And then just a couple of other notes. First off, in wrapping up, obviously, thank you very much for listening. Truly hope I can't imagine you didn't get some good ideas today. A couple of other next steps. Firstly, do please subscribe to the podcast. And then second, as far as show notes go, currently, I will have a website up shortly, but the easiest way to get them right now would either be through my newsletter, which you can get by emailing me at matt@mattandersonintl.com. That's matt@mattandersonintl.com. And with that, I'll sign off with my favorite question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson, and this was The Road Not Taken.